It's okay to wake up on the wrong side of the bed. We're human. It's going to happen. It's not okay to stay there. Having a positive morning routine, starting with declarations, some sort of prayer or meditation, some exercise, maybe a walk around the block or jumping jacks, something to fill your cup with positive energy. When you go out into the world to serve people, you're serving from the overflow of your cup. Like, your cup has to be full first. So spend your morning filling that cup so your day is more likely to go better.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. If someone gave you a blank check to go all in on investing in your personal development, how much money would you budget for it? My guest today has spent most of his life in some sort of personal development. However, in the last 5 years, he's hit it extra hard, investing over $250,000 of his own dollars in himself in order to learn, grow, and succeed. Tony Schmaltz has a passion for helping people upgrade their lives in any area possible. He specializes in mindset, wealth creation, relationships, and happiness, and has walked his talk when it comes to pursuing a better life for himself and his family. He also has a book out called Wake the Bleep Up. We'll talk about his journey from being miserable in the corporate world to his massive investment in himself and how that's played out so far. So take a deep breath. And now, exhale. All right, let's go. Tony Schmaltz, thank you for being here on A Joyful Rebellion, and I can't wait to talk about this because when I saw your info, I saw you writing a book, and that got my interest, but then I saw underneath that, you have spent the past 5 years heavily investing in your own personal growth and development, and I wanted to talk about that and how that intense investment, and I'll let you describe the process, but how that has shifted your perspective because you've been helping people grow and get out of their own way for the last 20 years. So this is nothing new to you, but it seems like you doubled, tripled, like 10x down over the last 5 years. So can you describe what you were doing before in helping yourself grow, helping your clients grow, but then what was the impetus to get you to just go in hyper-focus mode?
Yeah.
And walk us through that process and what results that's created for you.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I've been helping people grow for a better part of over 20 years. Most of that time was in the corporate world. And so I'd taken all kinds of leadership training. They'd sent me to different Dale Carnegie course, different leadership courses, things like that. So I'd always grown as a leader and helped other people grow within the organization.
Okay.
Although I never really felt like me. I felt like I was always following somebody else's agenda. When we first moved to Florida, we lived in the Seattle area. We moved to Florida in 2018 for a job. And it was when I got to that company that I realized I was definitely not being myself. These guys, it was negative, pounding from every direction, 8 different bosses. It was like the movie Office Space. It was really bad. So at that point, a friend recommended me to a coach or referred me to a coach. And after talking to this guy 3 different times, forked over a nice large 5-figure number and worked with this guy and renewed with him twice. I worked with this guy for 3 years. And after about the first 6 months, I was like, man, this is what I want to do. This is what I need to do. This is what I was meant to do. Throughout all of the different investments, the biggest part I found was finding me again, really finding me. So if you check out my social media or see people's comments on there. So my nickname is Schmaltzy. So my last name is Schmaltz. Everyone calls me Schmaltzy. Yeah. And the story behind that is that the German definition of the word Schmaltzy means to be overly sappy or cheesy, like a joker. Yeah. So that's me in a nutshell. And I'm that way with my clients. I'm that way with my friends, my family. Although with all that investment, the biggest part I found was I was able to, 1, become myself, 2, stop worrying about what other people think, and really grow the relationships around me, including my family, my kids, my siblings, everything. Just the joy and happiness returned to my life that was missing for so long.
That weaves in completely with what A Joyful Rebellion is all about, because as I started this podcast like a year ago, I started the podcast and started interviewing people, talking to people, and I explained A Joyful Rebellion as being that point in your life when you realize all the things that you've worked really hard to do got you to a point where you objectively look and appear, and on paper you can check all the boxes of success, but you still have a little emptiness inside. And what I've come to understand about that is what you just crystallized, is that it's the realization that you're not being yourself. Maybe you've kept a little bit of that in a box because you didn't want to show it to other people, or because you had to fit into a certain culture like you described in your office space corporation. And like I talked with a past guest, he helps people come out of the closet in all sorts of ways. It's not a sexuality thing, but it's that concept of coming out of the closet and, hey, I am a little quirky, and I'm going to show that around the workplace now.
Yeah.
On your profile, you gave a number that you invested in yourself. When you invest in yourself, and this is why I wanted people to hear this, because when you invest in yourself, you invest in everyone that you affect and whose lives that you reach. So it's not just a selfish thing to go in and go hard on this. And some people would say, my gosh, that could be spent so much differently. But throw in the number so people understand. It's not like you went in with $20,000 investment over the last 5 years. So when you give us this number, describe what that conversation was like for the stakeholders in your life.
Yeah. So the total number is right around $250,000 in the last 5 years. It's actually a little north of that. I was looking at it the other day, and not all at once. There was chunks of 25,000, 50,000, different chunks, 40,000. Although the nice thing was, because of the time where I started becoming a coach, I was able to make that back. By serving other people, I was able to make that back. However, the first 2 or 3 investments, having that conversation with my wife was not easy. I hadn't yet developed into the person I am today. So she's, you're going to do what? With how much? No, it's fine. It's going to work out. Don't worry. Trying to convince the other half. And then she also got to know these coaches real well. In fact, one of them, the one I was mentioning earlier that I worked with for 3 years, he is now probably one of my best friends. And we went and did the Tough Mudder in December together. And my wife knows him and his wife. But when she got to start to see the changes, the next ones were just like, okay, now it's not a matter of if I'm going to do it or having to convince her. It's okay. So who is this person? What are you going to get out of this? And how long is it going to, now it's not a matter of the questioning the money. It's about, where am I going with this? How do I know this person, so that she knows that I'm getting the value out of it?
Yeah. So you don't have to do necessarily investor presentations with a long slide deck and bar graphs for her anymore. Is that
Not anymore. Before, yes. Although it's funny for the audience out there, that's 250,000 in the last 5 years. And I'm getting ready in June to drop another 85. So it's never ending. However, if you see the value in it and you're able to creation is probably the biggest thing. I love to create. I love to help other people create. We create miracles each and every day. In fact, that was my wife's condition for this one, the next 85. She's like, all right, cool. You can't spend any of the money we have. You need to create it. I'm like, all right, here we go. Saddle up.
All right.
So it's creation mode is fun though. That's the fun part. When you get to create things, you get an idea, you take something and create out of that idea, and you see it turn into massive results.
You are doing this not only for your own personal development, it's helping your family, it's helping people closest to you, your friends, and that's great, but you are using this in a professional capacity. So I don't want anyone out here who is not trying to take this far and wide to think, oh gosh, to fix myself. Because sometimes people hire a coach to fix something about themselves they don't like, whether it's their procrastination problem. I did that years and years ago. I still procrastinate. A coach can't really fix anything. You come to realize quickly that it's yourself that has to fix everything. This is super helpful. But if this wasn't you trying to help other people in a professional capacity, you probably wouldn't have gone in that big on the investment just to work on your own personal growth. Or am I wrong about that?
I never thought about it that way. And I don't know if I have a good answer for that, because I did go down that path. I will say that had I stayed in that corporate world, it wouldn't have mattered how much development I had. I would have still been miserable with just constant pounding of negativity all around. So it was important for me to leave that. Some of the companies I worked at in Washington State were great. I would have excelled even further along the lines with this personal development. I really love helping people and serving people and helping people grow. And like you said, it's still your choice. It's still on you to change. Now, I can help you identify what it is you're telling yourself or what you need to work on. Ultimately, it's still your choice. When I worked in the corporate world, I didn't feel like I had that choice. And so that's where going out on my own and serving people this way is my own creation, my own choice.
Based on all the experiences you've had, based on all the clients you've been working with over the past 20 years. You just wrote a book. It's just come out, and it's called Wake the Bleep Up. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. What are some of the key takeaways from that experience that you had going through that process of massive transformation in 5 years? I don't know. My opinion is if you're over 30, 35, especially if you're over 40, 5 years is 3 weeks. It's a lot to take in a short period of time, because the older I get, things pop up on Facebook that says, here's a memory from 7 years ago. And I was like, wow, I thought that was 6 months ago. Are you kidding?
Right?
What's going on? When you do that massive amount of work on yourself and in your business on how to think about things, and then you've already been working with clients over the years, then you decide, okay, I've got to write a book about this because I want to help even more people. Because you can help people one-to-one. You can talk to a room of a couple hundred people if you're doing a speaking engagement. But when you've got that book, and it could be in 10,000 people's hands right now as they're reading through it on their morning, what are some of the key things you said, I've got to get this out there, and I've got to get this in people's hands so people know about this so they can make a change if they want to?
You hit a lot of the points right there. No matter how many people I want to help and want to serve, this is going to be one of the fastest ways to do it. Not everybody can afford a coach. And even those that can, not everybody knows where to find me or find good coaches to help them. So this way, by getting this book out here and talking about my transformation and how it works for you, and I even say that in the preface, read this book about you, not about me. Even though the stories are about my life, read it about how it relates to your life. Because I guarantee you almost every one of these stories everybody can relate to in some way, shape, or form. Oh, that sounds like me. Yeah, I am kicking my own butt. What is going on here? And it's phenomenal that I start going through the mindset pieces in part 1. Part 2, I start talking about habits. Here's some of your habits that you are currently doing. You know you are, and you identify them yourself as, okay, maybe I need to do something different. Here's how to actually make that happen. And that was the one thing that I made certain of when I wrote this book, is so many people out there write books and tell other people's success stories. Here's a concept that I learned from and this is what they said. No, every single one, even though I give credit to where I learned it from, every single one of them has a story of my own life and how I applied it to my life or with my family or my career or my business. So that way there's not somebody going, oh, they're just talking about somebody else. Nope. This is me. This is Tony. You're getting all of Tony right here. Well, maybe not all of Tony, but at least the transformation part of Tony.
Right. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit, because you just spurred 1,000 different thoughts, which is how this works. I want to talk a little bit about reconciliation. How do you reconcile? Because my experience in talking with a lot of people who do the public speaking in a coaching capacity, they talk to a lot of corporate audiences. I would imagine sometimes you'll get a call from a corporation. And how do you sort of put down the corporate culture that stifled you and brought you into this thing, and then at the same time talk about unlocking their own authenticity? Or do you just not talk about those things with that client? You don't want to wake them up, because then they'll all get out of the corporations. The corporations won't have any good people. I don't know. How's that work?
No, you're actually hitting a kind of a sticking point for me that I'm working on getting past right now. I have yet to speak to a corporation, and part of it because of what you said, because of my history and where I've been. It's something that I am going to get into. In fact, it's one of the things I went to a weekend experience with one of my coaches 3 weeks ago, and he's actually the person I'm getting ready to drop the 85K with. But he was saying that, he's like, Tony, you got to knock down that wall. He's like, I know your thoughts towards big corporations and your experiences. However, you have the ability to help these people, to serve these people.
Yeah, and sort of blend it and kind of reconcile it, like I said. Okay. Yeah.
So there are pieces that I would probably not put in there because I would never be invited back.
Right. Well, that's what I'm thinking right now. And also, I know in my experience, sometimes I'll try to generalize conversations that I have with people. Often I'm doing an interview with a ghostwriter because she helps people write their stories. I talk to people all the time who tell me, man, I would love to write a book, but I don't know how, and list all the reasons. So that's why I'm having that conversation with her, because she does know how. That is a resource someone could go to. Sometimes it's about reconciling when you do go to a coach. I know I've had this experience of, I want to have more impact on my community, on my family. I want to do better. I want to be more organized. Also, my authentic self is a happy-go-lucky ADHD person who just loves to be distracted by all the pretty things in life. How do I reconcile those two things? Because this one part makes me happy and not completely ineffective, but kind of ineffective, but this other part that can focus for a solid 27 seconds is probably not getting as much done. So when you talk to someone like that and you start to pick up on those patterns, how do you help them reconcile something like that?
The first thing is, you mentioned your authentic self. One thing we as people in general need to do is be comfortable being authentic with our inauthenticities.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you just said it yourself.
Yeah.
Your authentic self is those inauthenticities. So you got to be comfortable knowing that about ourselves. You've already said it's the ADHD. It's how do I stay focused? What is something that just brings you a whole lot of joy and happiness?
For me, that's adventures and things I've never tried before, whether that's a recipe, whether that's a DIY craft. I don't blow things up anymore as much. I try not to set anything on fire. That didn't go well when I was 7. Yeah, I was in timeout for a long time.
I can imagine. The reason I ask, though, is a lot of people struggle to focus in certain areas because it's not something they enjoy. And finding enjoyment in what you're doing, even if it's the most menial of tasks, there's ways of gamifying. I've had clients where they have tasks they need to do. It's an entrepreneur, stay-at-home mom that's an entrepreneur. She has to go get leads. She has to go reach out to people. She has to have conversations. She doesn't like any of those things. Like, how do you make this a game? How can you make this a game with yourself? Even with your kids. One of them I brought in and talked to one of her daughters and said, hey, here's what mom's trying to do. She's got to do 5 of these every day, 5 people every day. How can you help her? And she's, I'll try to make her a cake or something. If she makes 5 every day for the rest of the week, I'll do this. So now you've involved the daughter and which brings the mom joy. She's okay. Now it's more exciting because now Tiffany's involved and she's going to help me. So it's finding some way to take joy in what you do, even if it's the smallest of tasks.
I like that. What is one of the stories from your book that, in your opinion, has one of the biggest impacts, like one of the biggest transformation stories? Or I always love the aha moment. So it doesn't have to be a huge dramatic transformation, but what is something where you started out and you ended up in a completely different place than you thought you'd be? Or just, hey, it could be your favorite story too. I like those.
It's actually the same. It's
great.
And it's actually the introduction. And this story is before I started doing my transformation and personal development. However, it's so applicable. When we lived in Washington State, we used to go out to the coast of Washington every 4th of July. We'd camp out there and we'd drive our truck. We'd have multiple families who drive our trucks out onto the beach for 4th of July, build a big bonfire, watch fireworks. One year, my 4-wheel drive was broken and I didn't know it. So we go driving out into the beach, and as soon as I hit the soft sand, the back of the truck just dug right in. I'm sitting here. I had a couple other guys with their trucks. I had the biggest truck. They couldn't pull me out. There was no. The worst part was the tide was coming in. So in an hour, I would have been in water. And so I'm like, now what? So this ranger comes pulling out. He saw the whole thing and he's like, hey, here's what I can do. There's no cell phone service out there, so I can't call anybody. And this guy's okay. So I can call you a tow truck, which is probably going to run you about $200 to $250 to winch you out of there. Or I get this kid that can get you out for $80. I'm like, call the kid. And I'm in this big 3/4 ton Dodge Ram. And this kid, 17 years old, comes pulling up in a little mid-size Chevy 2-door half-ton pickup. And I'm looking at this. I'm thinking to myself, Lord, let this not be the guy. And I already knew it was because he's pulling up. He comes pulling up and he walks out and he's checking out the truck. And he says to me, you the guy that they called me about? I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, really? Maybe the half-buried truck in the sand would have been a good indication. So I'm like, yeah, it's me. He's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. So we looked around underneath the truck, found a good place to tie off to, and he pulls out this rope. And it's this 2-inch bungee rope. And I'm like, what? He's like, this is a bungee rope. I'm going to tie this off to your truck and off to the back of my truck. And I'm going to back right up to the front of your truck, and I'm going to floor it. I'll be going probably 50 or 60 miles an hour by the time this thing goes tight. When this thing goes tight, you hang on for dear life because I'm going to launch you out of this hole like a paper clip off a rubber band. And I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, all right, but I'll listen. I'll pay attention. This kid floors it. And I'm watching this thing unravel, this rope. And as it goes tight, I hang on. And sure as hell, he launched me like a cannonball out of a cannon.
Oh, my God.
And then he drugged me out to the next beach entrance and took me out onto the main road. So I told him, I said, hey, I got to stop at an ATM machine and get you some cash. I gave the kid $120. Forget the 80. I'm like, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I use that in the book as the intro because right after that, I say, now, this is what this is in store for you with this book. Be prepared to get launched like a paperclip off of a rubber band into your future, into your life, into your happiness. Again, it's not really related to personal development, but it is. We're about to slingshot you into your new self.
And also, you've probably seen people get stuck before. You've probably seen people get towed out, but You've never seen that before. And
No. And I'll give this kid credit. Now, this is not in the book, but when I drove back around, I walked. It was quite a distance, but I parked in the actual parking lot and then walked out to where everyone had the bonfire going. I had already built now that I had been gone for so long. I must have seen this kid drive back and forth 30 or 40 times. And at $80 a pop in one night, these kid's 17 years old. He's doing this as a summer job. I'm like, holy moly, this kid's making a killing.
Yeah, and giving people the best experience, like
right?
Something they'll never stop talking about for as long as that
was like 12 years ago, and I've never stopped talking about it.
That's so cool. That's so cool. So that parlays into, it sounds like, changing people's minds about things, which is sometimes as a coach what you have to do, or it sounds like the thing to get people over a certain limitation that they're having. So what are some of the ways that when you are working with someone who has limiting beliefs, or they have a fear around being themselves or thinking as big as maybe they could if they would just allow themselves to, what are some of the tools you use as a coach to nudge them in the direction they want to go?
One of the first things is identifying, because in almost all those cases you just mentioned, it's revolving around an acronym my coach gave me called WITOT. And it's WITOT, what I think others think. It's almost always about people pleasing. Almost all of our fears, our limiting beliefs, our doubts come from what we think other people are going to think about it. And so that's the first piece, is helping people realize that. And then the second part is helping these folks eliminate or reduce as much as possible, if not eliminate, the negative things that are being poured into their head, dump truck style. It's just being dumped. That means turn off the news. Say, stop, don't read the newspaper, shut off the news. I don't care what you watch. Doesn't matter where you stand, just shut it off, because it's nothing but negative. The people in your life. Now, granted, you can't eliminate everybody. Even you got family members that some might be negative, but reduce your time with those people. Identify who and what is bringing you negative vibes, negative energy, negative thoughts, negative feelings, and reduce or eliminate those. And that is really the first step for almost anybody, is to be able to turn that into a positive.
Yeah.
Then I also talk about the other thing I start with almost everybody, is developing a positive morning routine. If you wake up in the morning, it's okay to wake up on the wrong side of the bed. We're human. It's going to happen. It's not okay to stay there. Having a positive morning routine. Some people, it's declarations. I don't really believe in affirmations per se. Declarations are a little bit different. Starting with declarations, some sort of prayer or meditation, and where you stand on that. Some exercise, and super light. I'm not talking about going out and going to the gym, but maybe a walk around the block or some sit-ups and jumping jacks, something to fill your cup, so to speak. Fill your cup with positive energy. When you go out into the world to serve people, you're serving from the overflow of your cup. Like, your cup has to be full first. So spend your morning filling that cup so your day is more likely to go better. The second piece that I really hit on with almost everybody again is there is no such thing as a bad day. Most people don't like that concept. Most people will bring up some tragedy that happened, and I will counter back. I'll be like, you're right. That was a bad moment in that day. Even the death, even if it was a death in the family. Guess what? Yes, I'm not saying don't feel bad. However, that was still just a moment in time of that day. The entire day wasn't bad, just that time where you found that out.
Right.
And it's a concept people, once they grasp it, it's easier for you to get through your day. When you have something that irritates you, you're able to go, you know what? That moment's gone. Now I got to move on with positive energy here. It's not an easy one, but once you get there, it makes a world of difference.
I'm a big believer in that. And that's people hear me talk about Stoic philosophy all the time till they're sick to death of it. But that's a big Stoic philosophy. It's like things or situations, circumstances, they aren't good or bad. It's just the perception we give them, whether they're good or bad. And that's the only difference. And I've talked to some people about that who just don't believe it. Just the fact that everything's really neutral until we give it a meaning. And because the concert goer who was stoked about seeing whatever outdoor concert it was going to be really bummed if it rains, but the farmer 100 miles down the road is not bummed at all.
Everything is stories that we tell ourselves.
It is.
Our thoughts create our reality.
Yeah.
We try to assume what somebody else is thinking, and we don't actually know what anybody is thinking at any given time. And it's funny, there's an example I've used with several clients, and I've got a video of it somewhere. It's not, I don't know if it's on social or not, but I've got it buried somewhere, but where I'm actually having a conversation with 3 different people at the same time. And it was like a post that was holding up an outdoor roof or something like that. And I said, okay, I asked the 3 people, I said, individually, I pulled them aside. I said, what do you see? Oh, I see a post that's holding up the roof. Second one says, oh, I see a 4x4 that's painted this color. I'm like, cool. Third person says, oh, I see something that needs to be repaired because it's starting to get cracked and everything else. The point is, 3 different people looked at the same thing and saw 3 different things.
Yeah.
And for us, we only have control over what we see and what we think. We have 0 control over what somebody else sees or what somebody else thinks. When in general, human beings can come to that realization and know that we only have control right here, we're going to be happier and better off for it.
It's something once you figure it out, you still don't necessarily internalize it or completely believe it. Let's go on that theme of your thoughts create your reality, because if you're working with a client and they come to you with maybe a specific issue they're having or a specific opportunity for growth that they want to uncover and they're just not sure how to get there, then in that conversation, maybe the discovery call or something, you quickly realize they've spent 40 years talking to themselves in a certain way that's just not going to let them get where they want to be. How do you start peeling back the layers of that self-talk, of maybe the people they've been hanging around, the thoughts that they're having that have been creating the reality they are experiencing? And how do you start to shed that or help them shed that?
It's identifying first. It's asking a series of questions to find out. Like you said, it's all around a thought. And their thought is, I'm not good enough to be a successful entrepreneur. I'm not good enough to get this promotion at work or whatever that might be. And then it starts with, why do you think you're not good enough? And whatever that might be, we just keep digging down that path. Okay, I'm not good enough because I don't have this kind of level of experience, knowledge, or whatever. Cool. Where's that story coming from? It's funny because the most of the time when you really get into a subject like that, it comes back to something that happened in their past. It's funny you use the example 40 years because it was literally a week before my 40th birthday that I hired that coach, that first coach.
All right.
And so the stories, and it turned out that the story I was telling myself I had hung on to for 30 years. It was once I let that go, it was back to the I'm not enough. And this is where I start with clients. And usually, like you said, on a discovery call or first couple of sessions, we'll dig into what that is. Where do you want to go? What do you want to create? And what do you think is getting you there? Or what is keeping you from being there? And who do you need to be to get there? Those are the 3 starting questions I usually ask. Now, for me personally, I have an older brother who did it the way everyone says you're supposed to do it. Got accepted to a great college, got his MBA, worked his way up through the corporate world. Him and his wife are multimillionaires, blah, blah, blah. They don't have kids. They don't have family. They won't ever say it, but they're pretty miserable. However, I have 4 brothers. This is one of my older brothers. When I was 10 years old is when he graduated high school with the highest college scholarship that high school had ever seen. For the next 30 years until I identified this, I got to hear from everybody around us. Hey, did you see what Chris did? Or why don't you do more like Chris? Why don't you be more like Chris? Why don't you do this? So for years, without even realizing it, I was in my mind, back of my mind, I was living in his shadow. I never felt that consciously. It wasn't until I worked with my first coach that we dug in there and I was like, oh, that's it. I've been telling myself I'm not good enough because I'm not Chris.
Because
he
set
doing
the bar.
what Chris did.
Yeah.
Almost everybody has something like that.
Yeah, that goes totally back to what do other people think kind of thing, because they were telling you what they were thinking. Be more like Chris, and whether they were doing it overtly or from the side. I'm curious now, we talked about people who think they're not enough. Do you ever have clients who are just delusional and think that they've got it all together, but just come to you because they can't figure out why they're not successful yet?
Yes, all the time.
But what does that look like?
Actually, one of them recently, I had to end our agreement. I've only ever done that one other time other than this guy. And the sad part about that is one of the most dangerous phrases in the English language is, I know.
Yeah.
And this guy was that guy. I won't say his name. We'll call him Bob for sake here. I literally had to stop one day. I was like, Bob, you need to be open to what we're trying to do here. I don't care who you've worked with in the past, what courses you've bought. There's going to be something else you're going to get out of this, but not if you're not open to it. If you say, I know all the time and be a know-it-all, then you're not going to get anything out of this. And we had that conversation like 3 sessions in a row, and he was on a payment plan, and I had fulfilled the agreement up to the next payment scheduled. And I was like, I'm not going to process the next payment. We're going to call this right here. So I'm very selective about who I choose for that reason, who I choose to work with. Sometimes if I'm going through the discovery process with somebody, I might get that inkling that somebody is know-it-all. I might see something there that I can maybe pull that out of them.
Yeah.
This guy, unfortunately, he told me all the right things. He showed up on the first 2 calls before I even talked dollars, and he appeared as what was going to be a perfect client and turned out to be the opposite.
Oh, no.
The 2 most dangerous phrases, I know, and nobody will ever know. Those are the 2 most dangerous phrases in the English language.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, because when we talked about the people who come to you with a lack of confidence, I immediately got curious because there has to be the inverse of that. There has to be the opposite. And interested to hear if you've run up against it. And I'm also interested now in hearing you talk about being selective with clients. This is totally me just projecting right now, but I'm curious. You've just written this book. This book is going to have a lot of great stories. It's going to have a lot of opportunities for people who read the book to maybe see a part of themselves in some of those stories and say, oh, if Tony helped them overcome this, or if Tony overcame this himself and had growth from it, maybe I can talk to him and get that transformation I'm looking for. I wonder if, as a coach, are you in the back of your mind thinking, hey, if someone comes to me and wants coaching, I'm going to ask them if they read the book?
I hadn't thought of that yet, but that is a good point. I had actually thought that if somebody came to me, I would offer the book if they hadn't already read it as a part of the program. But that's a great point, because then they can see what they're getting into. As a coach and an author, I'm not what a lot of coaches are. A lot of coaches are what I like to call squishy. They're very much feelings, lovey-dovey. And I'm like, I am not. I am very direct. I call you out on your BS. In the book, I curse. I'm direct. It's not excessive, but it's make points. And I literally say at the beginning, before I get into my introduction story, I say, look, if you're somebody who likes to sing Kumbaya all around the campfire, this is probably not for you. This is direct. I curse. I swear. I tell you how it is. And if you don't like that, give it to somebody else who can handle it. But that's funny that you mentioned that. I'll have to think about that. Ask people if they've read the book first before we talk about it, or make that the homework before we consider working together. Hey, have you read the book yet? No? Cool. Here's your homework. Go read the book, and then we'll have another conversation. Yeah. And then they can see if they want to have another conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And then that way they know what they're in for, and you know that they've at least got a little bit of skin in the game.
Right.
And that's pretty cool. Can you describe who would be your typical client? Do you have a typical client? Maybe you don't. But if there's someone who comes to you like 7 times out of 10, would they have something in common with each other?
I try not to have a typical client. I know a lot of people talk about target market or niche or things like that. Steve Chandler, who's one of my mentors and author of 43 books, he calls himself a success coach. And he says, I will help anybody that I can help. He's like how I live as well. A lot of people that come to me are either other coaches or entrepreneurs, and usually startup entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, things like that. They're like doing all right, but I really need to get to that next level. I had so many people coming to me wanting to know marketing strategies and wanting to know how to grow their business. And I was like, okay, I think you misunderstand what I do here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can help you create things along the way. However, we need to find out what's really keeping you from that growth. It's funny because my message that I speak, if you watch my lives on social media or YouTube, my message really speaks to middle-aged married men who like to fish and golf and things like that. And in reality, most of the clients I've had have been women.
Okay.
Which is strange because everyone tells me it should be the other way around. And I'm like, I'm going to help whoever I can help.
So when people do come to you, it's all different kinds of people. And outside of the people who need marketing help for some reason, it sounds like the people who are coming to you, they're coming to you to get coaching to help them get past some sort of a block, some sort of a limitation they've put on themselves. And I know I've been guilty of this. I've been a photographer for a very long time, and I spent, and gosh, I'm still struggling with this. Maybe I need to talk to a coach about this, but as a photographer, it's really easy to put your work out there and let it try to speak for you, let it speak for itself, so to speak. And that used to be possible way back before social media and before things just got so crowded and noisy in the world. And now it's just not possible. I can create the best work and it could be amazing, but there are 1,000 other people doing the same thing. So it can't just be about the work. It has to be about the person behind the work or the philosophy behind the work or the movement behind the work. It has to be something bigger than just the work. And it's taken me a long time to figure that out. And it's taken me even longer to start to execute and implement. But it sounds like a lot of people come to you because they've got a limitation they put on themselves and they want to figure out how to just push past it. Would you say that's accurate?
It's very accurate. Most people that come to me, something feels off. They don't know what it is yet. They don't know what it is. They're like, I'm not happy. I'm not enjoying life. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. Can we have a conversation around that? Absolutely. Let's talk. Let's find out what that is. And some of them are like, same thing. I do get a lot of, like I said, a lot of entrepreneurs. A lot of them are like, hey, my business is doing well, but I don't feel good. I don't feel happy. Why is that? So it's really helping people find what brings them joy. And as a result of creating who they're being as a more joyful and fulfilled person, everything else takes off as a result. And we're able to create things within their businesses. But however, if you don't create who you're being first for yourself, for your spouse, your kids, your friends, whatever that is, then you're not going to find the success that you're looking for in the rest of your ventures. And creation is going to be that much harder.
Yeah, that's what a joyful rebellion is all about. It's you want the joy, but to get there, you have to be a little rebellious because you have to do things maybe you've never done before. And maybe you have to do things, not maybe, you definitely have to do things that kind of go against what your programming's been, what is normal for your community, what is normal even in your family, just because you've had that history of going along a certain way. And now you have to change it because whatever you've been doing is not bringing you joy. And so you have to rebel against that normalcy or that just suburban lifestyle, whatever it might be for you.
Right.
Then find your joy in that.
Yeah.
So I love that. What's the best way if someone's listening to this and they want to get your book? What's the best way for them to connect with the book, connect with you, and learn more about how you help people?
Yeah. So to get the book, you can go to WTBook.com. And honestly, it's just a redirect to Amazon. So you can go direct to Amazon if you want.
Okay.
And look it up. And even though it's got the symbols, it is searchable by Wake the Bleep Up or by Tony Schmaltz. Find me directly. You can go to TonySchmaltz.com, and it's got all kinds of information about who I am, who I serve, and how you can get in contact with me. I love that you said programming because that's actually chapter 1 of the book is forget the programming.
We talk a lot about programming on this podcast because it is such a thing, and it takes a while in life before you've realized it's happened to you. A lot of people think, oh, no, I'm an independent thinker. I think for myself. And then they look back a little bit and they're like, oh, okay. Or they look at their children if they get that far in life and they're like, gosh, okay, I see a pattern here. And so that's really important. And something I want to really call out for anyone listening, you and I have talked about it. I've talked about it with so many other people on this podcast from all sorts of categories, coaches, but people who do wildly different things. Self-development or self-growth, or let me put this there, personal growth starts with awareness. And you use the word identify a lot in this conversation today, and identify can be a certain type of awareness. But it really comes down to that because until you're aware of something, you can't do anything about it. And if you're not aware, just like a fish doesn't know it's in water, it can't do anything about the water. It doesn't really realize it's even there. And so that's huge when you can go to someone like yourself and that person can help you gain awareness because they're either reflecting something back to you or they're giving you maybe a different perspective, something else to think about. And that's so valuable. And that's why I started this conversation by talking about the level of investment you put into yourself, because your business, your family, your community, it starts with you, and you invested so heavily in that, which is why when I saw that, I was like, okay, I don't know of anyone who's done this. This is cool. I got to talk to this guy I got to talk to Tony about this, because on the outside, someone looking in, they'd be like, that's crazy. My Ferrari would be glistening. I don't think you can buy a Ferrari. But my point is, you made a significant investment. The world's going to be a better place because of it. Your family is going to be better. Your business is going to be a lot better. And when you invest in something that is going to provide a return, you get the benefit of it. And that's fantastic. That's the kind of people I like to talk about. That's the kind of conversations I want my audience to hear. So thank you so much for having this conversation. And I want to know, how are you keeping it schmaltzy down in Florida?
You mentioned awareness.
Yes.
I love that. And so one of the things that I do with clients is I have what I call schmaltzy tasks. At the end of every session, I give somebody a task, which is usually relative to what we were talking about. And we usually start with awareness. And one of the schmaltzy tasks is super simple, but it starts opening up your mind to seeing things differently. And that's take a different drive to work, the grocery store, to wherever you're going. You're used to going this way because you think it's the fastest way. Now go someplace different. And most people are like, oh, I didn't know that restaurant was there, or look at the color of that house. It starts to train your mind without you thinking about it, without you consciously thinking about your awareness. It trains your mind to think that way. You're like, oh, wow, look at this stuff.
Tony, thank you so much for spending time today having this conversation. I know I got a lot out of it. I got good perspective. Perspective is what I am always trying to gain after one of these conversations. And it sounds like you have done a lot of great things for a lot of people. I'm excited about getting your book, Wake the Bleep Up. And I love the name. It's so fun, and I know it's going to get a lot of people's attention. So thank you again for being here and sharing your experience with all of us at A Joyful Rebellion.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks so much for joining me today. And if you have an extra minute, I have a favor to ask. Some of you listen to this show on Apple Podcasts, and a lot of you I talk to are on Spotify or Amazon. I'd love it if you would take just a second to leave a rating or a review. It lets the platforms know that listeners are getting value from the show and suggest it to others who are interested in similar content. And as always, if you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a guest suggestion, or just general feedback, I'd love to hear about that too. Connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at ajoyfulrebellion.com.